At the family barbecue, my granddaughter said, "You're only still here because you haven't died yet." Not a smile left my face. The next morning, I sold the house without telling anyone. When the new owner knocked on the door, she was the one who had to leave. The smoke from the grill swirled around the backyard as I arranged the paper plates on the picnic table. My hands, spotted with age and lined with 70 years of hard work, moved with practiced precision. This barbecue was a tradition I'd maintained for decades, ever since James and I bought this house in 1974. Even after he passed away 15 years ago, I kept it going. Family was everything to me. "Martha, these burgers need flipping." Michael, my eldest son, called from across the yard. He stood by the grill, beer in hand, talking business with his brother-in-law instead of watching the food. "Coming," I responded, though I wasn't sure why I couldn't just enjoy being the guest for once. I walked over, feeling the slight twinge in my hip that had become my constant companion. Before we continue, comment where you're watching from and subscribe to the channel. We'd love to see how far our stories are reaching. The backyard was filled with the people I loved most in the world. Jennifer, my daughter, sat with her husband discussing their upcoming vacation to Italy. Michael's wife, Patricia, was showing off pictures of their new boat on her phone. My youngest, David, was the only one actually helping, setting up the coolers with drinks. And then there were my grandchildren, 5 of them, ranging from 25 to 15. The youngest ones were playing badminton near the old oak tree. Lily, my 17-year-old granddaughter, sat scrolling through her phone, occasionally showing something to her cousins who erupted in laughter. I flipped the burgers, savoring the sizzle and the familiar smell that always reminded me of summer Sundays when the kids were little and James was still alive. Those were simpler days when my role was clear and appreciated. "Food's ready," I called out, and they all gathered around the table. I watched with satisfaction as plates were filled and compliments on the food floated around. These moments made everything worthwhile. The mortgage I struggled to pay alone after James died, the double shifts I worked at the hospital to put 3 kids through college, the vacations I never took so they could have what they needed. The conversation flowed around me as I quietly ate my burger. I'd grown accustomed to this, being present but somehow invisible. Michael and Jennifer dominated most discussions with tales of their successful careers and ambitious plans. David occasionally tried to include me. Bless him. "Mom makes the best potato salad in the county," he said, giving me a wink. "It's really good, Grandma," said Emily, David's daughter, with genuine warmth. I smiled, grateful for the acknowledgement. "It's your grandfather's recipe, actually. He was the real cook in the family." Speaking of the house, Jennifer jumped in, completely ignoring my comment. "We were talking about the back bedroom, Mom. It would make such a perfect home office for Michael when he comes to visit. That light is just amazing in there." I nodded politely, though something in her tone made me uneasy. She'd been making comments like this more frequently, subtle suggestions about how my house could better serve everyone else. "The guest room is Michael's whenever he wants it," I said carefully. Patricia chimed in. "But wouldn't it be nice to update it? Those curtains must be from the 80s. "I like those curtains," I replied. "James picked them out." An awkward silence followed, broken by Michael. "Mom, we're just trying to help. This big house is a lot for you to manage alone." Before I could respond, Lily looked up from her phone, rolling her eyes. "Grandma, you're only still here because you haven't died yet." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap, though she'd said them casually, almost under her breath. The conversations around the table stuttered to a halt. Jennifer gasped. David said, "Lily!" in a sharp tone I rarely heard from him. But what struck me most was the momentary expressions I caught. The quick glance between Michael and Patricia. Jennifer's fleeting look of agreement before she composed her face into shock, the uncomfortable shifting of the other adults. "Lily, apologize to your grandmother right now," Jennifer said, though her reprimand lacked genuine outrage. Lily shrugged. "Sorry, Grandma. That came out wrong." But it hadn't come out wrong. It had come out exactly as she, and apparently others, thought. Maintained my smile, the same one I'd worn through James's funeral, through empty nests and lonely holidays, through doctor's appointments and bill worries. "That's all right, dear," I said, my voice steady. "Would anyone like dessert? I made apple pie." The conversation awkwardly restarted, flowing around me like I was a rock in a stream. But inside, something had cracked open. I looked around at my family, At this house that had been the center of our lives for nearly 50 years, and for the first time I saw clearly. The day continued, with laughter returning and the incident seemingly forgotten by everyone but me. As they all helped clean up, a rarity, I noticed other things I'd been willfully ignoring. Jennifer measuring the living room windows with her eyes, Michael examining the foundation near the porch with a contractor's scrutiny, Patricia commenting on how retro my kitchen was in a tone that wasn't complimentary. "Mom, we left some brochures on the coffee table for you to look at," Jennifer said as they were leaving. "Just some ideas we thought might interest you." I nodded and hugged each of them goodbye, including Lily, who seemed to have already forgotten her comment. David lingered behind, helping me with the last of the cleanup. "You okay, Mom?" he asked quietly. "Of course," I answered automatically. "Why wouldn't I be?" He looked at me for a long moment. "You know Lily didn't mean anything by it." "I know," I lied. "Teenagers say things without thinking." After David left, I went to the living room and picked up the brochures Jennifer had mentioned. Golden Sunset Village, independent living for active seniors. Downsizing with dignity, managing your estate for the next generation. I sat down heavily in James's old armchair, the weight of understanding finally settling on me. The house wasn't my home in their eyes. It was an asset, waiting to be redistributed, and I was simply the caretaker until I was gone. That night, I couldn't sleep. Lily's words kept echoing in my mind. "You're only still here because you haven't died yet." But beyond the hurt, something else was stirring. A spark I hadn't felt in years. Determination. The next morning, I made 2 phone calls. The first was to my old friend Rose, who had gone through something similar with her children 3 years ago. The second was to a real estate agent. I was still here. And it was time they all realized that here didn't have to mean where they expected me to be. That night, sleep evaded me like a cunning thief. I lay in the queen-sized bed that still felt too large without James beside me, staring at the ceiling fan as it made lazy circles above. Lily's words had wormed their way into my mind, echoing on repeat. "You're only still here because you haven't died yet." The casual cruelty of youth wasn't what hurt the most. It was the silent agreement I'd glimpsed in the adults' eyes, my own children, who I had raised with trembling hands and a fierce heart. Around 2 a.m., I gave up on sleep and padded down the hallway in my slippers. The house creaked and settled around me, a familiar symphony of sounds that had been the backdrop to my life for nearly 5 decades. I ran my fingers along the wall where pencil marks tracked the growth of my children, grandchildren, and even great-grandchildren. This house wasn't just wood and plaster. It contained the architecture of my life. In the kitchen, I made myself a cup of chamomile tea and sat at the round oak table where countless family meals had taken place. A photo on the refrigerator caught my eye. James holding newborn Michael, his face alight with pride. I remembered that day clearly, how terrified and elated we both were. We'd bought this house with money we could barely afford because James insisted our children needed a yard to play in. "We'll make it work, Martha," he'd promised. Together. And we had. When James died suddenly from a heart attack at 55, leaving me a widow at 40, everyone assumed I would sell the house. It was too big, too expensive for a single-income nurse with 3 children still at home. But I had refused. This was our home, our children's foundation. I picked up extra shifts, learned to fix leaky faucets and patch drywall myself, gave up new clothes and dinners out. Whatever it took. I sipped my tea, the memories flowing through me like a river after the snow melts. Rushing, relentless. Jennifer was 13 when James died. The night after the funeral, I found her curled up in our bed, crying into her father's pillow. "I'll take care of you, Mom," she'd promised with such conviction, her young face solemn in the dim light. Dad would want me to. Michael was 16, trying so hard to be the man of the house, mowing the lawn without being asked, checking the locks at night. David, only 10, would crawl into my lap even though he was getting too big for it, asking when Dad was coming back from heaven. I had held them all together somehow. Put Band-Aids on skinned knees, cheered at graduations, celebrated first jobs, danced at their weddings. This house had witnessed it all. I opened one of the kitchen cabinets and pulled out the shoebox where I kept important papers. Inside was a stack of thank you cards from Jennifer when I'd helped with her down payment for her first home. Letters from Michael during his first year of college, scared and homesick. Crayon drawings from David. Always of our family standing in front of this very house. When had things changed? When had I transformed from the mother they needed to the obligation they tolerated? I remembered the first time I noticed it, about 5 years ago after I'd had my hip replacement. Jennifer had stayed with me for a week to help out. I overheard her on the phone with Patricia. "It's just a matter of time before she can't manage on her own," she'd said in a hushed tone. "The house is way too much for her. Michael and I think we should start looking into options." At the time, I'd dismissed it. I was in pain, not thinking clearly, but after that, I began noticing other things. How Michael would casually mention friends whose parents had made the smart move to retirement communities. How Jennifer would point out things around the house that needed fixing, with the unspoken implication that I couldn't handle them. The brochures left on my coffee table weren't the first. There had been others, appearing like unwelcome guests after family visits. I'd ignored them, pretended not to notice the whispered conversations that stopped when I entered a room. I pulled out my reading glasses and looked at the newest pamphlets in the dim light of the kitchen. Golden Sunset Village featured smiling seniors playing golf and sitting in rocking chairs. The Downsizing with Dignity brochure showed an elderly woman happily arranging knickknacks in what looked like a shoebox apartment. My hand trembled, slightly as I pushed them away. Was this how they saw me? A problem to be solved? A burden to be managed? I got up and walked through the quiet house, looking at everything with new eyes. In the living room, I noticed a small notebook on the side. Table, Jennifer's, forgotten in her hurry to leave. I shouldn't have opened it, but something compelled me. Inside, in Jennifer's neat handwriting, was a list. Call contractor about Mom's bathroom. Discuss assisted living options with Michael. Ask David to talk to Mom about selling. Research elder law. Attorneys. My heart pounded as I flipped to another page. Mom's bedroom. Michael's home office. Dining room. Jennifer's craft space. Sunroom needs complete renovation. Pool could be filled in for patio. They were dividing my home while I still lived in it, planning my exit before I'd even considered leaving. I closed the notebook and put it back exactly where I'd found it. A strange calm settled over me. Not the resignation of defeat, but the stillness that comes with absolute clarity. In my bedroom, I opened my closet and reached for the old hat box on the top shelf. Inside was my own collection of brochures, not for retirement homes, but for the botanical gardens in Savannah, Georgia. I'd been collecting them for years, dreaming of visiting but never finding the right time to go. James and I had honeymooned in Savannah. He'd promised we'd go back for our 50th anniversary. He didn't live long enough to keep that promise, and somehow I'd never managed to return on my own. One brochure in particular caught my eye, a seniors community called the Magnolias, located just 2 blocks from the botanical gardens. I'd requested the information packet on a whim 3 years ago, then tucked it away as an impossible dream. I looked at the photos of bright apartments with private patios, perfect for container gardening. There was a greenhouse for residents, community classes, walking paths. The complete opposite of the institutional-looking places my children had picked out for me. My friend Rose had moved to Savannah after her similar experience with her family. "Best decision I ever made," she'd told me on the phone earlier. I should have done it sooner. As dawn broke, casting soft light through my bedroom window, I made my decision. I would not be waiting around to die in a place my family had chosen. I would live, truly live, in a place of my own choosing. The real estate agent had sounded surprised when I called so early in the morning, but he'd agreed to meet me at 9 a.m. He'd been even more surprised when I told him I wanted to list the house immediately and at a price slightly below market value to ensure a quick sale. "Are you sure about this, Mrs. Harrison?" he'd asked, concerned. I was more sure than I'd been about anything in years. I looked around my bedroom one last time before getting dressed. The sunrise painted the walls with a warm glow, highlighting the faded wallpaper James and I had hung together all those years ago. I would miss this house, every creaking floorboard, every sun-dappled corner. But the home I had loved was already gone, replaced by an asset my children were waiting to inherit. It was time to disappoint them. After all, I was still very much alive. The real estate agent, Mr. Collins, arrived precisely at 9 a.m. He was younger than I expected, maybe in his early 40s, with kind eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled. I offered him coffee, which he accepted gratefully. "Mrs. Harrison, I have to ask again. Are you certain about selling? This is a significant decision," he said, glancing around my kitchen with its dated cabinets and well-worn countertops. "I've never been more certain," I replied, sliding a folder across the table to him. Inside were comparable property listings I'd printed from the internet, along with notes about my home's features. I've done my research. His eyebrows rose slightly. I see you have. Most of my clients don't come this prepared. I was a nurse for 42 years, Mr. Collins. Preparation was part of the job. He nodded, respect flickering across his face. Call me Tom. Now, given the location and the size of the lot, we could list significantly higher than what you're suggesting. I understand, but I want a quick sale, minimal complications. I stirred my coffee, watching the light dance across its surface. And I'd prefer this to remain confidential until it's finalized. Family situation? He asked carefully. I met his eyes without flinching. You could say that. He didn't press further, just nodded and pulled out his tablet. We'll need to schedule a photographer, get some paperwork sorted. But with your price point, I'd be surprised if we don't have multiple offers within days. We spent the next hour going through the house, Tom making notes about selling points, the mature oak trees in the yard, the sunroom I'd added 10 years ago, the updated water heater. I followed him, seeing my home through a stranger's eyes, not as the repository of 50 years of memories, but as square footage and amenities. It felt surreal, like I was floating slightly above myself, watching someone else make these monumental decisions. But beneath the surreality was a growing sense of rightness, of reclaiming something essential. After Tom left, promising to have the listing agreement ready by tomorrow, I sat in my garden with a cup of tea. The late spring sunshine warmed my face as I watched a pair of cardinals flit between the branches of the dogwood tree James had planted when Michael was born. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. Jennifer's name flashed on the screen. "Hi, Mom," she said when I answered, her voice bright in that artificial way that meant she wanted something. "How are you feeling today?" "I'm fine," I replied, wondering if she'd always been this transparent, or if I was just now noticing. "Just enjoying the garden." "That's nice." She paused. "Listen, Mom, Michael and I were talking, and we thought it might be good if we all got together this weekend to discuss some things." "What things?" I asked, though I already knew. "Oh, just some ideas we have. About the future. Making things easier for you." I closed my eyes briefly. "I see. Great. So Saturday around noon? I'll bring lunch. Actually, Jennifer, I'm afraid I'm busy this weekend." The lie came easily, surprising me. "Busy? Doing what?" The incredulity in her voice stung, as if the concept of me having plans was unimaginable. "I'm meeting a friend for lunch," I said, Rose's face coming to mind. It wasn't entirely untrue. I'd be calling her right after this. "Oh." Jennifer sounded genuinely confused. "Which friend?" "Rose Matthews. We work together at the hospital. I didn't know you still kept in touch with people from work." Of course she didn't. She never asked. "We reconnected recently," I said. "It was lovely catching up." "Well, can you reschedule?" "This is important, Mom." I felt a spark of irritation flare in my chest. "So is my lunch, Jennifer. We can talk another time." "But I need to go now, dear. The kettle's boiling." Another small lie. "Love you." I hung up before she could protest further, my heart pounding slightly. It was such a small act of defiance, but it felt enormous. My phone buzzed with a text. Almost immediately. "Jennifer, Mom, we really need to talk. Michael is worried about you living alone in that big house." David agrees. I doubted that last part. David rarely agreed with his siblings about anything, especially regarding me. I decided not to respond. Instead, I called Rose. She answered on the second ring, her familiar laugh bubbling through the speaker. "Martha Harrison, twice in 2 days. I should buy a lottery ticket." "Hello, Rose," I said, smiling despite myself. "How's Savannah treating you?" "Like a queen, darling. The azaleas are in full bloom, and I just finished teaching a watercolor class at the community center. Can you believe it? Me, teaching art?" I could, actually. Rose had always been talented, though her nursing career had left little time for creative pursuits. That's what retirement was supposed to be, a time to explore new facets of yourself, not just wait for the end. "That sounds wonderful," I said, meaning it. "It is," she agreed. "Now, tell me about this real estate agent. Did you call him?" "I did. He's drawing up the listing agreement now." A beat of silence. "Well, I'll be damned. You're really doing it." "You're really doing it." "I think I am," I admitted, surprised at the certainty in my voice. "Good for you. And have you looked more into the Magnolias? There's a unit available just down the hall from me. 1 bedroom with the most gorgeous morning light for your plants." Felt a flutter of excitement. Actually, I was hoping you might be able to take some photos for me. If it's not too much trouble. Trouble? Martha, I've been trying to get you down here for years. I'll do better than photos. I'll take a video tour. The place is perfect for you. We talked for nearly an hour, Rose filling me in on all the activities available: gardening club, book discussions, day trips to nearby towns. By the time we hung up, I felt lighter than I had in months, maybe years. That lightness carried me through the rest of the day as I began the subtle process of sorting through my belongings. Nothing obvious. I didn't want to raise suspicions. If one of my children dropped by unexpectedly, but I started making mental inventories of what would come with me and what would stay behind. In the attic, I found a dusty box of my old gardening books, untouched since I'd given up my larger vegetable garden when bending became too painful. I pulled out container gardening for small spaces and felt a spark of inspiration. Perhaps in Savannah, I could grow tomatoes again, maybe some herbs on a balcony. As evening fell, I sat at my computer, researching moving companies and browsing the Magnolias website. The monthly fee was significant but manageable with the proceeds from the house sale, and the amenities were exactly what I wanted: independence with community nearby, activities without obligation, and most importantly, no one treating me like... I had one foot in the grave. My phone rang again. Michael this time. I let it go to voicemail. Then Jennifer again. Then a text from Patricia. Patricia. Jennifer says you're being difficult about meeting this weekend. We're all concerned, Martha. This isn't like you. I smiled wryly at that. They had no idea what was like me. They saw only what they expected to see: an aging widow, increasingly irrelevant, waiting to be managed. The next morning, I met Tom at his office and signed the listing agreement. The house would officially go on the market tomorrow, with the first showing scheduled for the weekend. How soon do you need to close? Tom asked as I handed back the signed papers. As soon as possible, I replied. And I'd prefer to accept an offer with minimal contingencies, even if it's not the highest. He nodded, making a note. And when do you plan to tell your family? I looked out his office window at the spring day, trees budding with new life. When it's done, I said simply. Tom studied me for a moment, then nodded again. I understand. My mother went through something similar with my sisters. Sometimes it's easier to ask forgiveness than permission. I'm not asking for either, I said, surprising myself with my firmness. I'm simply making a decision about my own life. He smiled. Good for you, Mrs. Harrison. As I drove home, I felt a curious mix of emotions: anxiety about the enormous changes ahead, sadness about leaving the home where I'd raised my family, but underneath it all, a growing excitement. For the first time in decades, I was doing something purely for myself. My phone rang through the car speakers. David's name appeared on the dashboard display. Unlike my other children, I answered his call. Hi, Mom, he said, his voice warm. Just checking in. Jennifer mentioned you were busy this weekend. Yes, I have plans with Rose. That's great, he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. I'm glad you're reconnecting with friends. This was why David had always been different. He actually seemed happy when I had a life outside of being his mother. How are the kids? I asked, genuine interest in my voice. As David updated me on Emily's soccer tournament and Sam's science project, I found myself wondering if he would understand my decision. Of all my children, he might, but I couldn't risk it. Not yet. The plan was too fragile, too new. David, I interrupted gently, I love you very much. You know that, don't you? He paused, clearly surprised by the sudden sentiment. Of course, Mom. I love you too. Is everything okay? Everything is fine, I assured him. Better than fine, actually. And for the first time in longer than I could remember, it wasn't a lie. 3 days after listing my house, Tom called with news that made my heart race. Mrs. Harrison, I've got 4 offers for you to consider, he said, his voice animated. And one of them is exactly what we hoped for. Cash, minimal contingencies, and they're flexible on the closing date. How soon could we close? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. 3 weeks? Possibly sooner? 3 weeks? In less than a month, I could be starting my new life. The offer is slightly below asking, Tom continued, but given the terms, I think it's your best option. I'll take it, I said without hesitation. Tom chuckled. Don't you want to hear the other offers? No need. This one meets my requirements. After hanging up, I sat in my sunroom surrounded by my houseplants, letting the reality sink in. The house was sold, or would be, once all the paperwork was processed. I had actually done it. My phone buzzed with a text from Rose. "Did you see the video tour I sent?" I smiled and replied, "Yes, it's perfect. And I have news. My house just sold." 3 dancing emoji appeared immediately, followed by, "Martha Harrison, you're full of surprises. When do you move?" 3 weeks? Call me ASAP. Instead of calling right away, I decided to drive to the botanical gardens in our local park. I needed space to think, to plan, to breathe. The gardens were quiet on this weekday morning. I walked slowly, along the winding paths, admiring the early summer blooms. A young gardener was planting marigolds in a circular bed. She smiled as I approached. "Those will be beautiful when they fill in," I commented. "That's the best part of gardening," she replied, sitting back on her heels. "Planning for what will be, not just what is now." Her words resonated with me as I continued my walk. That's exactly what I was doing, planting seeds for my future, not just accepting what was. At a bench overlooking the koi pond, I pulled out my phone and called the Magnolias. The administrator who answered was cheerful and efficient. "We'd be delighted to have you join our community, Mrs. Harrison," she said after I explained my situation. "Rose Matthews speaks so highly of you. The apartment she mentioned is still available if you'd like to put down a deposit." "Yes, I would," I said, feeling another piece of my new life click into place. "Wonderful. We can arrange for a virtual tour, or if you'd prefer to visit in person." "I trust Rose's judgment," I interrupted gently. "And I've seen the video tour she sent. It's exactly what I'm looking for." After taking my credit card information for the deposit, she asked, "And when might we expect you?" 3 weeks, give or take a few days." "Perfect. I'll email you all the paperwork and information about our move-in procedures." As I hung up, a weight I hadn't realized I was carrying lifted from my shoulders. I had a plan. A real, tangible plan that didn't involve being shuffled off to whatever facility Jennifer and Michael deemed appropriate. For the rest of the week, I worked methodically, sorting through decades of accumulated possessions. I donated books to the library, gave clothing to the women's shelter, and quietly packed the treasures I couldn't bear to part with: James's pocket watch, the children's baby books, my mother's china. I worked when I knew my children wouldn't. Dropped by, early mornings, late evenings, keeping the house looking normal enough that a casual visitor wouldn't notice anything amiss. But steadily, deliberately, I was dismantling my old life to make way for the new. The weekend arrived with a flurry of texts from Jennifer, each more insistent than the last. "Jennifer, Mom, we need to have this family meeting. Michael is flying in specifically to discuss this with you." "Jennifer, please call me back. This isn't like you to avoid us." "Jennifer, Dad would want you to be reasonable about this." That last one stung. James wouldn't have wanted me to be reasonable. He would have wanted me to be happy. He had always encouraged me to pursue my own interests, even when the children were small. It was only after he died that I'd put myself last, trying to be both mother and father to our children. The guilt trip might have worked on the old Martha. But I wasn't that woman anymore. I texted back, "I told you I have plans this weekend. We can talk next week." Almost immediately, my phone rang. "Jennifer." I let it go to voicemail, then listened to her frustrated message. "Mom, I don't understand why you're being so difficult about this. We're trying to help you. Michael and Patricia are driving over tomorrow at 2, and we expect you to be home. This is important." I deleted the message and turned back to the task at hand, sorting through my gardening supplies in the garage, deciding what would come with me to Savannah and what would stay behind. That evening, as I was carefully wrapping my favorite Tara, Cotta pots in newspaper, the doorbell rang. I froze, listening. It rang again, followed by a knock. "Mom? Are you in there?" "It's David." I relaxed slightly. Of all my children, David was the least likely to interfere with my plans. I quickly closed the boxes I'd been packing and went to the door. "David, what a nice surprise," I said, genuinely pleased to see him. He smiled, but his eyes held concern. "Can I come in? I brought dinner." He held up a bag from my favorite Italian restaurant. Over plates of chicken parmesan, David watched me carefully. "Jennifer's pretty upset that you won't meet with them tomorrow," I sighed. "I imagine she is. They're worried about you, Mom. We all are." "There's no need to worry. I'm perfectly fine." David set down his fork. "Are you? You seem different lately. I considered my son, now in his mid-40s with gentle eyes so like his father's. Of all my children, he had always been the most perceptive. I am different, I admitted. I'm finding my way back to myself. What does that mean? I wanted to tell him everything. About the house sale, about Savannah, about my excitement for this new chapter. But I couldn't risk him telling Jennifer and Michael before everything was finalized. It means I'm not going to any assisted living facility or retirement home they've picked out for me, I said firmly. I'm quite capable of making my own decisions. David's eyes widened. Is that what they're planning tomorrow? No wonder you're avoiding them. You didn't know? He shook his head. They said it was about helping you manage the house. I had no idea they were pushing for assisted living. I felt a rush of affection for my youngest. He'd always been the one to see me as a person, not just a mother. The house is fine, and so am I said, reaching over to squeeze his hand. Please don't worry. David looked unconvinced but didn't press further. After dinner, as he was leaving, he hugged me tightly. Whatever you decide, Mom, I'm on your side, he said quietly. Just keep me in the loop, okay? I nodded, throat tight with emotion. I will. Soon, after he left, I returned to my secret, packing with renewed determination. The next day, at exactly 1:30, I left the house and drove to the botanical gardens again. I wasn't going to be ambushed in my own home. When I returned around 5, there was a note taped to my door. Mom, we came by as planned. We're very concerned that you're avoiding this important conversation. Please call as soon as you get this. Jennifer, I took the note inside and tossed it in the trash. My phone showed 7 missed calls. 3 from Jennifer, 3 from Michael, and 1 from Patricia. There were also multiple texts, ranging from concerned to annoyed to borderline angry. I ignored them all and continued with my preparations. The closing was set for 2 weeks from now, with the movers scheduled to come 2 days before. Everything was falling into place. That night, I called Rose and told her about my encounter with David. Do you think he suspects? She asked. He knows. Something's up, but not what, I replied. David's always been more observant than the others. Will you tell him before you leave? I considered this. Maybe, but not yet. And what about the others? Jennifer and Michael sound like they're on a mission. I sighed, picturing their determined faces. They are, but they're about to discover that I'm not the passive, compliant mother they think I am. Rose laughed. That's my girl. You know, when I did this, my daughter Elaine didn't speak to me for 3 months, but now she visits me in Savannah twice a year and admits it was the best decision for everyone. I hope my kids come around eventually, I said, a twinge of sadness breaking through my resolve. I'm not doing this to hurt them. No, you're doing it because they were planning to hurt you, even if they wouldn't see it that way. After we hung up, I sat in James's old armchair thinking about my children. I loved them fiercely, always would. But somewhere along the way, they'd stopped seeing me, the real me, the woman beyond Mom. In Savannah, I'd have a fresh start. A place where no one had preconceived notions about who I was or what I should be doing at my age. A place where I could be Martha first and someone's mother second. 2 more weeks, I thought as I drifted off to sleep. Just 2 more weeks until I could blossom again. The week before closing flew by in a whirlwind of activity. The home inspection had gone smoothly, and the final paperwork was nearly complete. I'd arranged for a moving company to pack my carefully selected belongings and transport them to Savannah the day after closing. My new life was almost within reach. But as the saying goes, the best laid plans often go awry. It was Sunday morning when the doorbell rang. I'd been up since dawn, carefully, labeling boxes in my bedroom, the door firmly closed in case of unexpected visitors. When I heard the chime, I quickly shut the closet door where most of my clothes were already packed and went to answer it. Jennifer stood on my porch, arms crossed, with Michael and Patricia flanking her like sentries. Their faces were identical, expressions of determination. We need to talk, Mom, Jennifer said, stepping forward without waiting for an invitation. Now, I had known this confrontation was coming, but I'd hoped to delay it until after the closing. Taking a deep breath, I stepped aside and let them in. Would anyone like coffee? I asked, trying to maintain normalcy. This isn't a social call, Michael said, his voice clipped. He was the spitting image of his father, same strong jaw, same confident stance, but without James's warmth and understanding. Mom, we're worried about you, Jennifer began as they settled in the living room. You've been avoiding us, missing appointments. What appointments? I interrupted. Jennifer exchanged a glance with Patricia. I scheduled a tour at Golden Sunset Village for last Thursday. They called when you didn't show up. I felt a flash of indignation. You made an appointment for me without asking first? Because you refused to discuss this reasonably, Michael cut in. Dad would want us to make sure you're taken care of. There it was again, invoking James as if they knew better than I did what my husband would have wanted. Your father, I said evenly, always respected my decisions. That was different, Jennifer dismissed. You were younger then. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. When had she become so certain she knew what was best for everyone? When had my capable, loving child transformed into this woman who spoke to me as if I were a toddler? I'm not moving to Golden Sunset Village, I said firmly. Mom, be reasonable, Michael sighed. This house is too much for you to manage. The stairs, the yard work. The stairs I climb every day without issue. The yard service I've employed. For the past 5 years, I raised an eyebrow. I managed just fine, thank you. Patricia, who had been quiet until now, leaned forward. Martha, we understand this is difficult. Change always is. But Jennifer and Michael have researched several excellent communities. I'm sure they have, I interrupted, my patience wearing thin, but I won't be needing their research. Jennifer's face hardened. This isn't optional, Mom. We're not going to stand by and watch you struggle in this big house until you fall and break a hip or worse. That's exactly my point, I said, struggling to keep my voice level. You're not watching me at all. If you were, you'd see that I'm not struggling. Michael stood up, pacing the room like he used to do as a teenager when he didn't get his way. This isn't just about you, Mom. Have you thought about what happens if your health declines? Who do you think will have to drop everything to take care of you? There it was, the real concern. Not my well-being, but the potential inconvenience to them. I've taken care of myself for 30 years since your father died, I reminded him. I've never asked any of you to drop everything for me. That's not the point, Jennifer began, but I cut her off. No, I think that is precisely the point. This isn't about what's best for me. It's about what's easiest for you. A tense silence fell over the room. Patricia shifted uncomfortably while Jennifer and Michael exchanged glances. That's unfair, Mom, Jennifer finally said. We love you. We want what's best for you. Then respect me enough to let me decide what that is. Michael shook his head. You're being stubborn. This house is too big, too old, too much work. You need to be practical. I almost laughed at the irony. If only they knew how practical I'd been. I agree the house is too big for me, I said carefully. Jennifer brightened. So you'll look at the retirement communities we've found? No, I said simply. I've made other arrangements. Michael stopped pacing. What arrangements? I hadn't planned to tell them like this, but they'd forced my hand. I've sold the house. The silence that followed was absolute. Jennifer's mouth opened and closed without sound. Michael stared at me as if I'd suddenly started speaking a foreign language. Patricia's eyes widened in shock. You what? Jennifer finally managed. I sold the house, I repeated calmly. The closing is next week. You can't do that, Michael exploded. This is our family home. It's my home, I corrected him. My name is on the deed. I've paid the mortgage for the past 30 years. But where will you go? Jennifer stammered. I've found a lovely apartment in a community I like. Which one? Patricia asked, pulling out her phone as if to take notes. Golden Sunset? Whispering Pines? Neither. It's called the Magnolias, in Savannah. Another stunned silence. Savannah? Michael repeated. As in Georgia? That's 6 hours away. 5.5 with good traffic, I corrected mildly. Jennifer's face had gone pale. Mom, you can't move to Georgia. You don't know anyone there. You don't have doctors there. Actually, I do know someone there. My friend Rose moved to the Magnolias 3 years ago, and they have an excellent medical center affiliated with the community. This is insane, Jennifer declared, recovering her composure. You can't just sell the house and move hundreds of miles away without discussing it with us first. Why not? You were planning my future without discussing it with me. That's different, Michael insisted. We're your children. We're responsible for you. I stood up, drawing myself to my full height. No. Michael, you're not. I'm responsible for myself. I always have been. Michael paced again, running his hands through his hair. "We can contest this. The sale, I mean. We can say you weren't in your right mind." "Michael!" I cut him off sharply. "I am perfectly competent, as my doctor will attest. The house is sold. The papers are signed. It's done." He stared at me, then abruptly grabbed his car keys from his pocket. "I need some air," he muttered, striding toward the door. Patricia hurried after him, throwing an apologetic glance over her shoulder. Jennifer remained seated, her face a mask of hurt and confusion. "Why didn't you tell us?" she asked quietly. "Would you have listened? Really listened?" She didn't answer, which was answer enough. After Jennifer left, I sat alone in the suddenly quiet house, emotionally drained but oddly peaceful. The confrontation I'd dreaded was over. The truth was out. My phone buzzed with a text from David. "Just heard from Jennifer. You sold the house? Call me." I smiled slightly and dialed his number. "Mom," he answered immediately. "Is it true?" "Yes," I said simply. A pause, then, "Savannah, huh? It's beautiful there. You visited once when you were about 12, remember? Your father and I took you to Tybee Island." "I remember," he said softly. "You collected shells and said someday you'd live near the ocean?" My throat tightened. Of all my children, David had always paid attention to the small details of who I was. "Are you happy about this move?" he asked. "Yes," I answered without hesitation. "Nervous, but happy." "Then I'm happy for you, Mom." 6 months after the move, I sat on my small private patio at the Magnolias, sipping morning coffee as the sun warmed my face. My container garden flourished around me, herbs, cherry tomatoes, and flowers in a rainbow of colors. A hummingbird darted between the salvia blooms, its wings a blur of motion. The transition hadn't been easy. The first month was a blur of unpacking, learning new routines, and occasional bouts of doubt. Had I made a mistake? Would my children ever forgive me? But as spring gave way to summer, and summer to early fall, I found myself settling into a rhythm that felt surprisingly right. Rose had been my lifeline, introducing me to other residents, showing me the best walking paths, inviting me to join the gardening club where I now served as secretary. I'd taken up watercolor painting again after a 40-year hiatus and discovered a talent I'd forgotten I possessed. My phone chimed with a text message. "David. Landed safely. See you in about 30 minutes. I smiled, anticipation bubbling through. Me. David had visited twice since my move, bringing his children who delighted in exploring the grounds and feeding the koi in the community pond. Jennifer had called regularly but hadn't visited yet. Michael remained distant, though Patricia occasionally sent photos of their children. The doorbell rang precisely half an hour later. I opened it to find not only David and his family, but Jennifer as well, standing slightly behind them, clutching her purse with nervous hands. "Surprise," David said, grinning. "Look who decided to join us." "Jennifer," I breathed, reaching out to embrace my daughter. She hesitated only a moment before hugging me back. "Your place is lovely, Mom," she said, glancing around at my apartment with genuine appreciation. "The light is beautiful." "Come see the garden," I urged, leading them to my pride and joy. As Jennifer admired my thriving plants, I noticed something in her expression I hadn't seen in years. Respect. "You seem different," she said quietly, while David's children exclaimed, over a butterfly in the flower bed. "I am different," I replied. "I'm myself again." Later, as we walked through the botanical gardens adjacent to the Magnolias, Jennifer linked her arm through mine. "I'm sorry," she said simply. "I should have listened to what you wanted." "Yes, you should have," I agreed, but squeezed her arm to soften the words. "But you're here now. That's what matters." That evening, after dinner in my small dining room filled with laughter and stories, Jennifer helped me wash dishes while David put his children to bed in the guest room. "Michael asks about you," she admitted. "He's still hurt, but he misses you." "He knows where to find me," I said, handing her a plate to dry, "when he's ready." "And if he never is?" I considered this. "Then that's his choice, just as this was mine." After they left 2 days later, I sat on my patio watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. A year ago, I couldn't have imagined this life. This independence, this peace, this sense of possibility. Lily's cruel words at the family barbecue had been a gift in disguise. They had shattered the illusion that staying put, accepting my children's vision of my future was the only option. I was still here, very much alive. And for the first time in decades, I was truly living.